The other day, while I was scrolling TikTok, I decided to search up a game called Destiny. Now, to give some context, Destiny is a first person shooter released by Bungie back in fall of 2014. At the game's release, people had very mixed opinions about it. Some people really liked it, some people hated it. But the general consensus at the time was that the game was, it was alright, it was okay. People would just give it an average 6 or maybe even 7, but it was nothing special. But when I searched the game on TikTok, all I can find are people reminiscing and gushing about it, talking about how it's one of the greatest games ever made.
I don't like sand. It's coarse, rough and irritating. It gets everywhere.
If you had no prior knowledge of Destiny and you only searched it on TikTok, you would think this is some sort of masterpiece. So you may ask, what camp do I fall into? Do I think Destiny is just this mediocre, unforgettable game, or do I think it's one of the greatest games ever made? Well, I mean, it's like, it's alright. It's like, it's not even that fucking good, actually. But why has this change in perception occurred? How is it that Destiny was perceived as a mediocre game all the way back in 2014, to now in 2026 it's perceived as a great game? But Destiny isn't the only media product to have this change in perception. There are tons of media products that are perceived poorly upon release, only for years later to be perceived as much better than they originally were. Take the Star Wars prequels for example. The perception of these movies on release were very mixed, and there was quite a big amount of people that hated these movies. But 19 years on from the last prequel movie, look at this quote that Hayden Christensen gave, the actor for Anakin Skywalker, talking about how he felt when the prequels were originally perceived to how they are now. I think that those movies have held up well over time. It feels like vindication for the work that we did. Everyone that worked on those movies thought that we were part of something special. We all wanted to do our very best work, and we cared a lot about it. And to see the response from fans now, it's very cool. Now, if we're all being honest with ourselves, these movies are not very good.
They've gone up the ventilation shaft.
Victory!
It's awful.
Now, despite some of the dreadful clips I've shown you, I still know friends who like the Star Wars prequels, somehow. But why do I think the prequels are objectively bad, but my friends really enjoy them? And why am I on the other side of this coin when it comes to Destiny? Well, I think the answer is quite simple. All of the friends that I know that like the prequels grew up watching them as kids, and I, on the other hand, did not. And this also helps to explain why I like Destiny so much, as I grew up playing it as a kid. And in this video, I want to look into how nostalgia can affect the enjoyment of the media that we consume. But what is this feeling called when you mostly have positive memories of things that you've grown up with as a kid? Obviously, the feeling that I'm describing is called nostalgia, and how it affects our choices in what media we do and don't consume. But before I start explaining any of this, we need the core concept of what nostalgia really is and how it affects us. First of all, let's look at the etymology of the word nostalgia. The word nostalgia comes from the Greek word nostos, meaning homecoming, and the word algos, meaning pain. From this, we can infer the first definition of the word, to roughly mean the mental pain that one goes through due to the desire for them to return to their homeland. Which makes sense, as when the phrase nostalgia was first coined all the way back in 1688 by Swiss physician Johannes Hofer, who describes the feeling of nostalgia as a disease that afflicts young soldiers and students who are sent abroad to work and become consumed with a desire to return to their homeland. Hofer also talks about the symptoms that people with nostalgia would suffer with, including lethargy, insomnia, anxiety, depression. Physical symptoms included heart palpitations, open sores, and confusion. And in some people's cases, they were inflicted with nostalgia so bad that they refused to eat, leading to their deaths due to starvation. But we as a species have grown and developed quite a bit since 1688. I mean, look at the things we've made in the past 20 years. You ain't getting this in 1688. And just like us, the term nostalgia has developed quite a bit since 1688. When people talk about nostalgia now, they often aren't referring to the mental anguish someone living abroad goes through as they can't have a Friday night takeaway.
Who wants a fucking burger?
What I'm saying is, this definition of nostalgia is quite outdated. So what is the modern day definition of nostalgia? Well, I think the Cambridge Dictionary sums it up pretty well. A feeling of pleasure and also slight sadness when you think about things that have happened in the past. Okay, now that we're all on the same page on what nostalgia really means, we can get to explaining the nitty-gritty of how nostalgia is affecting our perception and making things in the past seem better than they actually are. To help me with my explanations, I'll be using multiple academic studies. The first of which is this 1997 academic paper called The Temporal Adjustments in the Evaluation of Events, the Rosy View. The main point about this paper is something called the rosy view. The rosy view is made up of two things, rosy prospection and rosy retrospection. Now, what do these words actually mean? Well, rosy prospection means the tendency for people to anticipate events more favorably than they actually experience them at the time. And rosy retrospection is pretty much the same thing. It's just a tendency for people to remember past events more fondly than they actually did at the time. However, these two things aren't proving that much, as rosy retrospection and rosy prospection are just statements. I could make the Naby Keita view, which is the tendency for people to think Naby Keita is the best footballer of all time, which he definitely isn't. Where it gets interesting, however, is the relationship between rosy prospection and rosy retrospection, and this is where the paper thinks that people's bias towards past events is happening. In the paper, the relationship between rosy prospection and rosy retrospection is called the consistency effect. This is when people align their memories of an event with their expectations held prior to the event instead of the actual feelings during the event. But before I start talking about the consistency effect, I want to go back to rosy prospection and talk about what's causing it. After all, the theory doesn't really work if you don't know why people are more excited before an event than actually during it. One of the reasons why our anticipation or expectations can exceed the actual experience is because during an event there are far more distractions to someone that can affect their overall perception of the event. For example, there might be one really annoying small side character in a movie or one clunky piece of dialogue and it just distracts you, taking away from the actual experience. However, because these distractions are unimportant and fleeting, they aren't represented in the overall evaluation of the aspects before and after the event. And furthermore, distractions could also actually reduce one's evaluation of other aspects of an event because distractions may prevent you from fully appreciating those other aspects. But when we're anticipating an event, we aren't dragged down by these distractions and we're only focusing on the core main aspects that make up this event. That's why our expectations usually exceed the reality. Alright, so cool. Everything that I've just said is great, but is there anything actually proving that the relationship between recollection and anticipation is causing us to think things in the past are better than they actually are? Well, luckily for me, the people that made this paper went through multiple studies to prove their point, and I want to talk about one in particular. For this particular study, they took 38 undergraduate students on a 3-week bike ride across California to see if high amounts of anticipation actually led to people recalling events as more enjoyable as when they had actually experienced them. For the trip, students were asked to give a narrative account, basically detailing their thoughts and feelings about the trip. Students were also given a questionnaire with several questions pertaining to the enjoyment of the trip. They were asked to either disagree or agree with this statement on a 7-point Likert scale. To make sure there was no discrepancies in the findings of this study, all participants beforehand had a positive expectation of the trip. Before the trip started, only 5% of participants in their narrative accounts anticipated some aspect of the trip being better than they expected, and then another 5% of people anticipated something being worse than they expected on the trip. So what were the actual results during the trip? Was a good time had by all? Well, during the trip, 13% of people reported something being better than they expected, whereas a whopping 61% reported something being worse than they expected. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 61 is a lot bigger than 13. So it's pretty safe to say that people were a lot more disappointed in the trip than they were pleasantly surprised during it, as only 8% of people had their expectations exceeded, while a whopping 56% of people had their expectations disappointed. Now here's the funny thing, after the trip, 8% of people recalled something being better than they had expected, whereas only 11% had recalled something being worse than they had expected. That is a massive decrease. In fact, 50% had just forgotten every disappointment on this trip. Evidently, some people were not wearing helmets, I'm guessing, for them to change their minds. Obviously, I'm joking, but why are people changing their minds on this? Well, one reason for this is that certain negative aspects are seen as less important after the trip is finished. In one student's narrative reflection after the trip, he says, "All the complaining that I did seems so silly to me now, because all I can remember is making a lot of great friends," suggesting that all the reasons behind his complaining are now trivial and unimportant. For example, one student wrote, "I'm sick of the rain." However, later on in a narrative, he changed it to, "Maybe it was a good thing that we had a lot of rain." And this isn't like the last point where they're making this aspect seem unimportant to the entire evaluation of the trip. They're actively changing their mind and saying, "Now this thing's good." Furthermore, because this bike trip was 3 weeks long, there was ample time for people to change their evaluation of things. However, only 8% of people changed their evaluation during the trip, while after the trip, 53% of people changed their mind on a certain aspect. And almost the entirety of these changes were in a positive direction, being 96% of them. Now, I just have one more thing to show you from this study, and it's this graph. Now, you may be wondering what anything on this graph actually means, as 28 enjoyment on its own doesn't mean anything really. Just looks like a FIFA card stat. Well, along with the narrative accounts, students were given 4 statements and asked to agree to them on a 7-point Likert scale, 1 being strongly disagree and 7 being strongly agree. The statements were very simple and very similar to each other, just asking students if they thought they were going to enjoy the trip and if they thought the trip would be rewarding. So they compiled up everyone's answers from these 4 statements, and now we have this graph. And as you can clearly see, the enjoyment rating is a lot higher for the before and after, as the average for both is a 26 enjoyment rating, while for the during it's only 22. So, with all this evidence, I think this puts a strong case forward that having high expectations for an event will retroactively give us a better view of it than it actually was. But how does this theory relate to a TV show, games, movies? Obviously there's going to be a lot of anticipation when you go on a 3-week bike trip with all your friends in sunny California. But is there going to be when you put on a TV show? Well, there has to be some sort of anticipation, whether that's through a trailer, a recommendation of a friend, a website, or a review. Otherwise, why are you choosing to consume this piece of media? Something about that piece of media has intrigued and excited you and given you an expectation. And this is why I don't think it's a coincidence that a nostalgia bias is the strongest for the media that we consumed as children, as our levels of anticipation and excitement for things are at its highest when we're kids. And I think this is because as a kid you've experienced a lot less things. For example, going to see a movie at the cinema when you're 7, 8 or 9 is really exciting because you've probably only ever experienced that once or twice before, so it's fresh and new. And this goes with a lot of things in life. As a kid, Christmas and birthday parties are really exciting, but when you get older and you experience more of them and you get used to them, the excitement levels drop and the novelty wears out. I also think kids are more excited about experiences because they have less accessibility. What I mean by this is, as a kid, you're broke, you have no money. For me, for example, I only got about £10 pocket money a month. So, I'd either have to wait until Christmas, wait until my birthday, or save up my pocket money for ages. And all this waiting creates a lot of anticipation and excitement for the game that I wanted. From my memory, one of the times that I've been the most excited in my life was back in Christmas 2014, when me and my brother begged our parents to get an Xbox One for Christmas. And when we finally opened up that packaging and we saw that Xbox One, we absolutely went crazy, like ballistic. And that's because at that time, getting an Xbox One seemed unattainable for me and my brother. I mean, they were probably like 400 quid at the time, so there's no way in hell that either me or my brother was able to purchase one. But now, cut to present day, and about a year ago, I bought the newest Xbox, and it's a good, great console. But don't get me wrong, when the delivery driver was dropping it off, I wasn't like, I wasn't jumping for joy from excitement, and that's because I have adult money now. I can buy any game anytime I want. I can buy any console anytime I want. Going to the cinema isn't a treat anymore. My parents don't have to buy me the ticket. All these things are very much in my grasp now, so there's no sense of anticipation and excitement waiting for these things to happen. In 2025, I only went and saw 2 movies at the cinema, those being the Minecraft movie and James Gunn's Superman. Now, why did I go see these 2 movies in particular? After all, there are a lot more critically acclaimed and higher rated films that came out in 2025. As with the Minecraft movie, I had no expectations at all that that movie would be good. And my expectations were right. That movie was, okay.
Chicken jockey!
At best. Well, if I knew the Minecraft movie wasn't going to be good, then why did I go see it? Well, it's because I'm very familiar and nostalgic about Minecraft, and it's also one of the reasons why I went and saw Superman. I mean, the whole damn world is probably nostalgic and familiar with these two things. That's why these two movies are in the top 10 highest grossing movies of 2025. I mean the entirety of the top 10 highest grossing movies of 2025 that are either a remake or a sequel to some well-established media product or franchise. These were the movies that people were consuming the most in 2025, and half of them aren't even good. This is the thing about people's consumption and taste in media. They value more what they're familiar with over quality. And I mean, we're all guilty of this. I mean, I just told you that the only other movie I saw at the cinema was the Minecraft movie, but I do not have supreme taste. To get a person to branch out into a new media product, there usually must be something familiar accompanying that product to help with the branching out. For example, I'm not someone who plays or loves 2D fighting games that much, but I do love Dragon Ball. So back in 2018 when I saw they were making a 2D Dragon Ball fighting game, I didn't care about the quality, I was just like, ooh, it's Dragon Ball, I have to buy it, look at Goku's chiseled face.
You've charmed me.
The same goes for me with FIFA. FIFA isn't this great quality game, everyone knows that.
Penrith!
But I'm someone who consumes a lot of it. Why? Because I love football. Now take the two newest games that I played in 2026, those being Resident Evil 4 Remake and Hades 2. Now despite me having zero experience with them until I purchased them, I'm still very familiar with those games as I played previous games in those franchises. Or think about when a friend's trying to recommend you a TV show, movie or game. After they use every single adjective to describe how good it is, people usually go, if you like X, Y, and Z, then you'll like this. If you like Lies of P, then you'll like Dark Souls. It's all about making this new product sound familiar to people. This is the reason why I've recently been playing a game called Clover Pit at the moment, as I saw online people constantly saying this game is similar to a game called Balatro, which I'm very familiar with and really like. And even though the game is great, I'm fairly certain if I had never heard these comparisons, I would have never picked the game up. And so when there isn't anything familiar in a new media product to consume, I often find that I'm just re-consuming or re-watching media products that I've enjoyed in the past. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've beaten Arkham City, Sekiro, Shovel Knight, Banjo-Kazooie, and these are all games that, like, once you beat them once, they're very much the same on a second playthrough. There isn't that much different. Or the amount of times that I go online and search for a new movie, and then I can't find anything that takes my fancy, so I end up going back to an old reliable and watching Kung Fu Panda for the 8th time. I generally think I've reconsumed some media so much that I'm sick of it. Even though I think the Eisendrache is the best COD Zombies map of all time, I generally cannot play that map anymore. There is only so much the Eisendrache a man is meant to consume. And this isn't just something exclusive to me. In a sample of 1,000 respondents, over 95% reported that they actively chose to re-experience already consumed media. And media companies know this. In 2023, the TV show Friends accounted for 25 billion stream minutes across the USA, which is why HBO Max paid $425 million for a 5-year deal to have Friends on their streaming service. Or how the streaming minutes for all the top 10 US original streaming series in 2023 reached 133 billion minutes, while Suits, a show that ended in 2019, on its own got 57.1 billion minutes in 2023. But why do we choose to reconsume already experienced content? Well, before that, let's briefly talk about how repeated exposure itself behaves psychologically. Satiation is the process by which repeated exposure to the same content leads to a gradual decline in enjoyment. However, not all repetition produces boredom. Some people experience what's called escalation, a counter process in which repeated engagement leads to increased emotional intensity or fascination over time. Even when the novelty of an experience fades, the experience of repetition can make the experience feel richer and more satisfying. Unlike satiation, escalation reflects a process of heightened engagement, often emerging when repetition reveals new interpretive layers. As with complex drama series like Breaking Bad or The Wire, where each repetition deepens understanding of narrative detail. A third pattern, appreciation, captures a more selective, meaning-oriented form of media enjoyment. Appreciation involves the recognition of emotional depth, moral insight, or personal relevance. Basically, this familiar content allows people to make a deeper, more meaningful connection over time. Repeat consumption can foster appreciation as viewers shift from surface-level entertainment towards deeper, more cognitive engagement. Together, satiation, escalation, and appreciation demonstrate the dynamic nature of reconsumption. Whether a viewer's response diminishes or deepens depends on the viewer's orientation to that experience. Okay, now let's get into why people are choosing to reconsume media. There are three broad motivations for people to reconsume media, those being comfort, social connection, and nostalgia. First, let's talk about comfort. Familiar media offers stability when the present feels difficult to navigate. Menke found that people who are unsettled or stressed by rapid changes in their media environment are more likely to experience media nostalgia and to use familiar content as a stabilizing or comforting resource. And another study found that people engaging with their favorite TV programs after periods of mental fatigue help with replenishing both mood and self-control. And participants who wrote or thought about a beloved show after completing demanding tasks show greater recovery compared to those who wrote about a neutral topic. And this makes a lot of sense because after a long stressful day of working, sometimes you want to watch something that's easy to digest and comfortable, instead of taxing your brain by following a whole new world and story. Another reason people rewatch media relates to the sense of connection it provides. When real-world relationships are strained, distant, or temporarily unavailable, imagined characters in fictional worlds can act as companions. These one-sided but meaningful connections, often referred to as parasocial bonds, allow viewers to feel close to media figures who are familiar and trusted to them. A researcher describes this process as social surrogacy, in which people turn to well-liked characters to meet belongingness needs in the absence of direct social support. The last appeal of rewatching media is down to nostalgia. Psychological researchers conceptualize nostalgia as a past-present self-continuity, or the sense that one's past and present selves belong to the same ongoing identity. From this perspective, rewatching becomes a tool for maintaining that continuity. In a large-scale study of audiences who repeatedly consume what they term classic old movies and TV series, researcher Zhang found that nostalgia strongly predicted the intention to rewatch. The more nostalgic viewers felt, the more likely they were to return to familiar titles. Another researcher, Sars, found that participants described rewatching as a way to reconnect with earlier periods of their lives, with some anticipating the comfort of returning to familiar stories, and others noting that nostalgic feelings emerged as they relived what excited them in the past. So nostalgia can act as a motivational tool to reconsume past media, while also deepening your emotional connection to that said product, and reinforcing your past identity as a kid. And so the curtain closes on this video. I think I've exhausted everything I wanted to say on this topic about nostalgia and how it affects our enjoyment and taste in media. I truly do believe that nostalgia plays a pivotal part in how we enjoy and view media, whether people want to believe it or not. And I thank you for watching this video, and goodbye.